And I want to start it off by talking about the reptilian Dracos that you have a lot of experience with, Randy.
Well, I mean, probably the first I'd learned about them was just hearing, rumors and scuttlebutts and so forth about them. But my first experience of them was when I was in the MDF, when they actually attempted an invasion of Mars. We were basically about to have a big fight between a group of Terran humans, a group of indigenous reptoids, and a group of indigenous insectoids. This dropship came down, and it was a whole drama affair. But that was my first time experiencing them and seeing them.
And for the audience, the MDF is?
Mars Defense Force, correct.
Okay.
My function is to be more diplomatic on everything. So you've been to the military and you are still in the military?
Absolutely, yes. Still have active duty rank and security clearance, correct.
Perfect. What do you think is the actual relationship, the Dracos to human people right now?
Right now, minimal. I would say we probably started the eradication of the Draconians within Terran space in the late 90s or early 2000s. And from what I understand, there's less than 100 of them on the surface of the Earth right now, and they're being hunted down. So I consider them to be an old problem. Most often when people want to talk about them or their influence, you're really talking about the past and not much that is relevant to the future. Doesn't mean that they're not a problem in the larger universe, because they're still out there, but we have ejected them from our primary space, and they're not nearly as much of a problem here as they ever were in the past, that's for sure.
So to my understanding and what I've heard is that the Dracos are still active in the universe, and they still are trying to bring their system over certain planets.
Absolutely.
Can you agree on that?
Absolutely. No, I would consider of the larger intergalactic threats, yeah, they're a top 10 for sure. They're a top 10 intergalactic threat to anybody, anywhere, I would have to say.
Yeah, all right. I've learned a lot about them from the perspective of the Greys. Mm-hmm. I also learned from different sources that they opposed some kind of installation upon Earth, mm-hmm. which means they influence the system that Earth has. Mm-hmm. Do you have any information on that?
You'd have to give me some more details for me to try and pin something on that, but I don't have anything specific I think that I could answer.
So the Greys accused them, or at least, well, from their perspective, there had been some modifications on the social structure system of the Earth.
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah, that would be over time. I mean, there are certain people who have talked about the history of the Draconians influencing human culture. That's very true. I think that
they go way back.
Yeah, way back. Yeah. The kind of influence or breeding within the blue bloods or the royal families, that's correct from what I understand. So they have had an influence, and certainly a negative social influence that is what I would say is away from the intergalactic norm of moving towards type 1 civilization, which they have, pushed to keep us from getting to type 1 civilization, because that makes the species more controllable. But again, yeah, that's the history of, and definitely something that influenced us over time. But even though if they're physically not as much of a problem, yeah, they left their fingerprint for sure. And so some of the things we're dealing with in finance, banking, hierarchical structures, military governmental structures, we're still dealing with the mess that they left for sure.
From the perspective of the Greys, who are capable of time travel mm-hmm. and moving towards temporal dimensions, they say the Dracos are also capable of that, and they have used that.
Yes.
All right, okay.
Correct. Yeah, they certainly have used time travel to interfere from time to time. Now, I have to take a step and say, temporal mechanics is not my forte. However, I've talked to some smart guys with time core, so I hope I understand it as well as I do sometimes. My understanding is there are specific windows in the past that are vulnerable points. You couldn't just physically bring a person or a ship to want to, mess with time. There are certain windows in which you could come to a very specific point. And so wherever there's an entry point, someone could come in and tinker. But there's also intergalactic, temporal time lords, or whatever you want to call them. Now that we have a fully established, Terran time core, time wars became a thing. And I think at the moment, I don't know if I'm speaking too soon, but I'd say we have a pretty good lock on people not messing with the time stream right now.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed. But that definitely has been a thing in the past, for sure.
I already stated that this goes like at least 15,000 years ago.
Yeah, at least, for sure.
at
Yeah,
least.
a long time.
So you have the same information.
I don't know how long specifically they've been here, but I would say it goes back, I mean, I'd gander it's closer to 40, 50, or maybe 100,000 years ago. And from what I understand, when you get into certain large historical numbers, you have civilizations that exist today that do not remember what happened 400,000 years ago. So they have some understanding of that history. Chronovisors give you a certain amount of accurate information, but there is some stuff, the farther back you want to look, the fuzzier it gets. So chronovisors really only go back a certain number of thousands of years before the image is completely blurry because the tachyons are too weak or something like that. So there's some things that happened 500,000 years ago that we're kind of think it happened that way, but unless there was someone who was old enough to be there, there's some archaeological, historical guesswork in all of that.
Are you also aware of the Greys having repaired or influenced the timelines of humanity?
Because we know of it, no less than 5 factions of Zetas or Greys. Some of them have certainly tried to do harmful things. Some have certainly maybe tried to do helpful things. Again, they're not my most experted area, but again, because there's 5 different factions, yeah, you know, who's doing good things, who's doing bad things. Someone tells you they're your friend one day, and then you find out they're not your friend the next day. So that's been our relationship with the Greys mostly for the last 50, 60 years is, oh, you're our friend. Oh, no, wait, now you're not our friend. Or these guys are our friend. Oh, wait, they're not our friend. So they're very self-serving. Let's just be honest about that. They're very self-serving. So it's hard to get them to have what we consider, you know, keeping your word in an agreement. You know, they keep agreements based on practicality, you know, more than anything. But we kind of like to think, well, I gave my word, so I'm going to keep my word on that. They don't necessarily give a crap about that. So
Would you agree with that, Tim?
About the contracts and the different relationships, absolutely. I agree with Randy in 100% of what you told already.